October 23, 1942, Henderson, mid-morning. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The humid jungle air hung heavy with the tang of cordite and rotting vegetation. Corporal James Mitchell of the 1st Marine Division, 1st Regiment, knelt beside a fallen Japanese soldier near the outer perimeter. His hands trembled, not so much from fear as from exhaustion after 72 hours of continuous fighting. The struggle for Henderson Field was underway. Beside the body lay an unexpected prize, a Type 100 submachine gun, its chrome barrel catching the dappled sunlight. The weapon appeared immaculate and well-made, with distinctive markings and a side-mounted magazine. Mitchell inspected the workmanship, noted the adjustable sights, the bipod mounts, and the bayonet lug. His M1 Garand already felt familiar and heavy after months of jungle marches. 11.2 lbb with bayonet and sling. For a moment he weighed the options. Then he made the choice that would be echoed thousands of times across the Pacific. He set the captured Japanese gun aside and kept his Garand. That simple, repeated decision across scores of islands would illuminate deep truths about warfare, industrial philosophy, and technological advantage. The Japanese had produced what they thought was a modern automatic weapon. Lighter, automatic, and with a higher ammunition capacity. Yet Marines routinely refused to swap their semi-automatic rifles for these seized submachine guns. What those Marines sensed intuitively took historians decades to fully explain. True combat effectiveness depended less on rate of fire or stylish novelty than on other, more practical principles. The mathematics of that preference revealed two fundamentally different approaches to war-making. One emphasized theoretical progress over field-proven reliability. The other favored established effectiveness over newness. In jungle fighting, where a malfunction could mean death, that choice proved decisive. The story doesn't begin with a single clash, but with parallel development on two oceans and two very different military cultures. In January 1936, after years of trials and debate, the U.S. Army officially adopted the M1 Garand as its standard service rifle. A revolutionary moment. For the first time, a major power committed to equipping frontline infantry with semi-automatic service rifles instead of bolt actions. The road to adoption was neither smooth nor guaranteed. Canadian-born designer John C. Garand joined Springfield Armory in 1919, bringing ideas about gas-operated actions that would transform infantry arms. Garand was a meticulous engineer who grasped both mechanical detail and the practical needs of soldiers. Early prototypes failed tests. Changes in ammunition forced redesigns. Army officials questioned whether semi-automatic fire was necessary, and budget limits threatened the program. Garand persisted through the 1920s and early 1930s, refining his gas-operated rotating bolt design. When fired, gases tapped from a barrel port drove a piston that cycled the bolt, rotating to unlock, extracting and ejecting the spent case, and loading a fresh round from an 8-round en-bloc clip in a fraction of a second, enabling a skilled rifleman to fire as quickly as he could squeeze the trigger while retaining sight and aim. The M1 fired the powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge, the same caliber as the bolt-action M1903. Springfield, a 150-grain bullet, propelled at roughly 2,200 centimeters to 950 fts, and producing around 2,150 ft of muzzle energy. Maintaining this caliber kept ammunition compatibility across the arsenal and preserved the lethality U.S. planners demanded. The rifle itself weighed about 9.5 lb empty, roughly 11.2 lb, with a loaded clip, bayonet, and sling, and measured 43.6 in overall with a 24 in barrel. Its walnut stock and steel hardware made it rugged and serviceable. The adjustable rear aperture sight allowed accurate fire at varying distances. In trained hands, it could effectively engage targets beyond 500 YD, though most fighting occurred much closer. General George S. Patton famously lauded it as the greatest battle implement ever devised, in a letter to Major General Levin C. Allen, Chief of Ordnance, on January 26, 1945. But in 1942, when the 1st Marine Division landed on Guadalcanal that August, such praise was still mostly theoretical. Many Marines still carried M1 903 Springfield bolt actions. Garands were in comparatively short supply as production ramped up slowly. The Marine Corps had adopted a phased rollout, issuing Garands to rear echelon and test units first to evaluate performance in brutal amphibious conditions. Yet those Marines who received Garands soon formed fierce attachments. When they pulled the trigger, the rifle fired. When they aimed, the round did its job. And when a man was struck by the 30-06, he tended to go down and stay down. Across the Pacific, Japan followed a different developmental path. In the 1930s, Japanese doctrine stressed long-range rifle marksmanship, bayonet charges at close quarters, and machine gun support. The concept of a submachine gun, a high-rate pistol-caliber automatic, held little appeal to planners schooled in older traditions. Japan had purchased small numbers of European submachine guns in the 1920s and early 1930s, roughly 420 445, 5 on man and Salforens, Bergmann pattern guns and a few Austrian examples, and mostly dismissed them as niche weapons unsuited to their tactics. That view shifted in 1937 when Japanese forces first encountered Chinese troops wielding submachine guns, effectively in the Second Sino-Japanese War. Urban combat in the Battle of Shanghai, August 13 November 26, 1937, was particularly revealing. In dense street fighting, Chinese soldiers with submachine guns could lay down devastating close-range fire, while Japanese infantry with primarily bolt-action Type 38 rifles found themselves outgunned in house-to-house engagements. The shock of Shanghai forced Japanese planners to reconsider, and in August 1937, the Imperial Japanese Army ordered the development of a domestic submachine gun. Lieutenant General Kijiro Nambu, designer of the famous Nambu pistol, was tasked with producing a Japanese submachine design inspired by the imported Bergmann types the Army had studied. Development continued through several experimental models. The experimental Model 3 appeared in 1938, followed by Model 3B and 3C variants in 1939. Finally, in 1940, the Imperial Japanese Army formally adopted the weapon as the Type 100 submachine gun, the designation referring to the Japanese imperial year 2600. The Type 100 fired the 8mm Nambu cartridge, officially designated 8x 22mm Nambu. This pistol round fired a 102-grain bullet at approximately 130 ft/s, generating only 242 ft/lb of muzzle energy. This represented less than 1 to 10th the power of the 30-06 fired by the M1 Garand. The weak cartridge limited effective range to approximately 150 meters under ideal conditions, though practical combat range proved much shorter. The weapon itself featured a simple blowback-operated mechanism firing from an open bolt. The cyclic rate of fire varied by model. The early Type 140 fired at approximately 450 rounds per minute. The later simplified Type 144 increased this to 800 rounds per minute. The weapon fed from a curved 30-round magazine inserted horizontally on the left side, an unusual configuration that made the weapon awkward to handle in confined spaces. Production of the Type 100 occurred at Kokura Arsenal and Nagoya Arsenal, with the weapon designed by Nambu Arms Manufacturing Company. Total production numbers remain disputed due to incomplete wartime records. Japanese military historian Shigo Sugawa documented approximately 10,000 units produced, with nearly 9,000 being the later simplified model. However, some Western sources estimate up to 30,000 units may have been manufactured, though the lower figure appears more credible based on Japanese records. The Type 100 suffered from numerous design flaws that became apparent under combat conditions. The complex bayonet lug and bipod mounting system added unnecessary weight and manufacturing complexity. The horizontal magazine made the weapon difficult to fire from cover. The safety mechanism proved unreliable. The rear sight, optimistically graduated to 1500 mt on early models, bore no relationship to the weapon's actual capabilities. Perhaps most critically, the weak 8mm Tan Nambu cartridge lacked stopping power and penetration. Manufacturing quality declined precipitously as the war progressed. Early production models showed reasonable fit and finish. By 1944 and 1945, with Japanese industry collapsing under bombing and blockade, Type 100 specimens exhibited rough machining, poor welding, and inferior materials. Chrome lining disappeared from barrels. Wooden stocks gave way to crude fabrications. Tolerances loosened to the point where reliability, already marginal, became entirely unpredictable. Distribution compounded these problems. The Imperial Japanese Army never fully embraced the submachine gun conceptually or logistically. Production remained low priority. Most Type 100s went to specialized units. Paratroopers received a collapsible stock variant. Naval Special Landing Forces, Japan's Marines, received limited quantities. Tank crews occasionally carried them. Regular infantry rarely saw them. By the time Marines encountered Japanese forces on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and other island battles, the Type 100 remained a rare curiosity rather than a standard weapon. When Marines did encounter Type 100s, either captured or taken from dead Japanese soldiers, they invariably rejected them after brief examination. The reasons were immediately apparent to combat veterans. At typical Pacific Island engagement ranges of 100 to 300 wide-bodied, the Type 100 could not reach targets that the M1 Garand could destroy with aimed fire. The 8mm Nambu round failed to penetrate even light cover that the 30-06 punched through effortlessly. Dense jungle vegetation that barely slowed the powerful Garand round would deflect the weak pistol cartridge. In close-quarters combat, where the Type 100 should theoretically have excelled, practical realities intervened. The horizontal magazine snagged on doorways, vegetation, and equipment. The crude sights made accurate shooting nearly impossible. The unreliable safety led to accidental discharges or failures to fire when needed. Most critically, Marines had no reliable source of 8mm Nambu ammunition. Using a captured weapon meant depending on captured ammunition, a risk no Marine would willingly take when his life depended on his weapon functioning. The M1 Garand, by contrast, offered Marines everything they needed for survival in Pacific combat. The semi-automatic action allowed rapid aimed fire without losing sight picture. A trained Marine could deliver 8 rounds accurately in less than 10 seconds, then reload with a fresh aim block clip in under 3 seconds. The powerful 30-06 cartridge could penetrate Japanese bunkers, destroy light fortifications, and stop enemy soldiers instantly at any practical combat range. Reliability proved paramount in the harsh Pacific environment. The Garand functioned in mud, sand, salt water, and jungle humidity that would have destroyed more delicate weapons. The gas system, while requiring maintenance, proved remarkably tolerant of fouling. The operating rod and bolt could be cleared and lubricated in seconds. Parts were completely interchangeable between rifles. Every Marine knew that his Garand would fire when he pulled the trigger, regardless of conditions. The ammunition supply system reinforced this reliability. The 306 cartridge was manufactured by the millions and dozens of American factories. Every round met strict specifications. Every clip functioned identically. Supply lines, despite the vast Pacific distances, ensured continuous ammunition availability. Marines never worried about running out of 306 ammunition. They never questioned whether a round would fire or function properly. Training created the final advantage. Every Marine learned to shoot, clean, maintain, and repair the M1 Garand during basic training. They understood the weapon intimately. They could disassemble and reassemble it blindfolded. They knew its capabilities and limitations. They trusted it because they understood it. The Type 100 remained an unknown, a foreign weapon, with unfamiliar characteristics and uncertain performance. The contrast extended beyond the weapons themselves to the vastly different industrial systems that produced them. American industry churned out M1 Garands by the millions. Springfield Armory in Massachusetts and Winchester. Repeating Arms Company produced the rifle under government contract throughout World War II. Production quality remained consistently high throughout the war. Every Garand was completely interchangeable with every other Garand. Every part was standardized. Every weapon was reliable. American mass production represented the pinnacle of industrial capability. Japanese industry, increasingly strained by war, blockaded by submarines, bombed by aircraft, and desperately short of raw materials, produced Type 100 submachine guns in small batches with declining quality. Early production versions showed reasonable finish and acceptable quality. Late war versions revealed rough machining, poor welding, inferior materials, and declining standards. Corners cut in production to increase output made already unreliable weapons even less dependable. The weapons reflected the collapse of Japanese industrial capacity. This reflected essential differences in industrial philosophy and national capacity. American mass production prioritized standardization, interchangeability, and rigorous quality control at massive scale. Every part met specifications. Every weapon underwent testing. Defects were identified and corrected. The system emphasized consistent, reliable output. Japanese production, more artisanal and craft-based in tradition, struggled desperately to maintain any quality standards under crushing wartime pressures. Resources vanished. Skilled workers were conscripted into combat units. Factories were bombed. Supply chains collapsed. The weapons reflected these catastrophic pressures. Marines understood these differences instinctively through direct experience. When they pulled the trigger on their Garand, it fired. When they aimed at an enemy, the weapon performed. When they hit an enemy, he went down. When they needed to engage targets at 300 Walleritide, the Garand delivered. When their weapon got dirty, wet, muddy, or damaged, it still functioned. These certainties kept Marines alive. The Type 100 offered none of these assurances. It represented an unknown, a gamble, a risk. In combat, Marines never gambled with their lives. The legacy of this choice extended far beyond World War II into subsequent decades of military development. The M1 Garand continued in American military service through the entire Korean War from 1950 to 1953, where it again proved superior to submachine guns in most combat situations. The weapon directly influenced development of the M14 rifle, which was essentially an M1 Garand modified to USA 20 round. Detachable box magazine and capable of selective fire between semi-automatic and full. Automatic, the core design principles of the Garand prioritizing reliability, power, and effectiveness over all other considerations, influenced American military small arms development for decades afterward. The Type 100 disappeared into historical obscurity. After the war ended in August 1945, American occupation authorities issued remaining stocks to Japanese police forces, where the weapons limitations mattered far less than in military combat. Few examples survive today in museums and private collections. Most were destroyed, lost in the chaos of defeat, or simply forgotten. The weapon remains a footnote in military firearms history, a cautionary example of a design that looked advanced on paper but failed in practice. Modern military historians and firearms experts examining both weapons objectively with decades of perspective consistently conclude that Marines made the correct choice. The M1 Garand represented the pinnacle of semi-automatic rifle development in its era. It combined tremendous power, exceptional reliability, and consistent effectiveness in a package that served American infantry superbly throughout the war. The Japanese Type 100 submachine gun, while representing a reasonable engineering effort given Japanese resources and tactical doctrines, simply could not compete effectively with the Garand in realistic combat situations. Trinensen who consistently rejected, captured Type 100 weapons in favor of their M1 Garands, made tactically sound decisions based on practical combat realities rather than theoretical specifications. The cold numbers support these conclusions unambiguously. The M1 Garand played crucial roles in every major Marine Corps operation throughout the entire Pacific theater. Guadalcanal from August 1942 through February 9, 1943. Tarawa on November 20th through 23rd, 1943. Saipan from June 15th through July 9th, 1944. Plo from September 15th through November 27th, 1944. Ima from February 19th through March 26th, 1945. Okinawa from April 1st through June 22nd, 1945. The weapon contributed decisively to victory in every single campaign. Marines armed with Garands achieved consistent tactical success against determined, well-trained, fanatically motivated enemies in the most difficult terrain and environmental conditions imaginable. The Type 100, despite being produced in thousands, made essentially no meaningful impact on the war's outcome. Its limited distribution, design flaws, and persistent logistical problems ensured it remained a curiosity, rather than an effective combat weapon. Japanese forces would have been better served by producing additional rifles or machine guns than by investing increasingly scarce resources in a flawed submachine gun design that addressed no real tactical need. Combat experience validated these technical differences in blood. During the October 23rd through 26th battle for Henderson Field, Marines of the 7th Marine Regiment faced massive Japanese attacks attempting to retake the airfield. In the desperate fighting, Marines with M1 Garands could engage Japanese troops at ranges where enemy rifle fire remained ineffective. The rapid semi-automatic fire of the Garandaloed individual Marines to break up Japanese assault formations before they could close to effective range. Private First Class Mitchell Page, Atrontidan Fanidi Fiend Freitron, manning a machine gun position during this battle, would later receive the Medal of Honor for his actions. When Japanese forces overran adjacent positions, Page and the riflemen around him held their ground. The M1 Garands of the supporting riflemen provided the volume of accurate fire needed to prevent the Japanese from exploiting their breakthrough. Page himself would later credit the firepower of the Garand-armed Marines with helping save his position. Sergeant John Basilone, another Medal of Honor recipient from the same battle, witnessed the effectiveness of the M1 Garand firsthand, though primarily a machine gunner himself. Basilone observed how Marines with semi-automatic rifles could maintain continuous suppressive fire, while others maneuvered. This tactical flexibility, impossible with bolt-action rifles, transformed small unit tactics throughout the Pacific Campaign. The evolution of Marine Corps tactics reflected growing confidence in the M1 Garand. Initial skepticism about the rifle's reliability in amphibious operations disappeared after the weapon proved itself in combat. By the time of Operation Galvanic at Tarawa in November 1943, Marines had developed new assault techniques that maximized the Garand's capabilities. Fire teams could maintain continuous suppressive fire, with one Marine firing while another reloaded. The 8-round capacity and rapid reload capability meant that Marines could advance under their own covering fire. The Battle of Saipan in June and July 1944 demonstrated the M1 Garand's effectiveness in varied terrain. From the beaches to the mountainous interior, Marines engaged Japanese forces at distances ranging from point-blank to over 400 yards. The versatility of the M1 Garand allowed Marines to adapt their tactics to each situation. In the cane fields, Marines could engage Japanese snipers at extreme ranges. In the cave sand ravines of Mount Tapoch, the stopping power of the 30-06 proved essential for defeating Japanese positions protected by natural fortifications. Captain Lewis H. Wilson, who would later become Commandant of the Marine Corps, earned the Medal of Honor on Guam in July 1944. Leading his company in an assault on Fonte Hill, Wilson personally demonstrated the M1 Garands' capabilities by eliminating multiple Japanese positions with accurate rifle fire. His citation specifically noted his effective use of rifle fire in leading the assault. This represented countless similar actions where individual Marines armed with M1 Garands could decisively influence tactical situations through superior firepower. The Japanese military's own assessment of American small arms documented in captured reports acknowledged the overwhelming superiority of the M1 Garand. A translated Japanese training document from 1944 warned that American semi-automatic rifles could deliver devastating firepower and advised that Japanese forces should avoid rifle duels at extended ranges. The document recommended night attacks and close combat as the only viable tactics against American rifle-equipped units, tacit admission of the Type 100's inadequacy. Production statistics from 1944 illustrated the widening gap between American and Japanese industrial capacity. Springfield Armory alone produced more M1 Garands in a single month than Japan produced Type 100s during the entire year. Winchester's monthly production exceeded Japan's total wartime submachine gun production. These numbers translated directly into battlefield superiority. Every Marine infantry battalion possessed more firepower than an entire Japanese regiment, primarily due to the superiority and availability of the M1 Garand. The Battle of Plo from September through November 1944 showcased the M1 Garand's superiority in the most challenging combat conditions. The 1st Marine Division encountered Japanese forces employing new defensive tactics, fighting from elaborate cave systems rather than launching suicidal charges. In this grinding battle of attrition, the M1 Garand's accuracy and penetration proved essential. Marines could place accurate fire into cave openings at extended ranges, while the 30-06's penetration could defeat improvised armor and fortifications. Private First Class Richard Krause, posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor at Plo, exemplified the individual firepower that the M1 Garand provided to every Marine. When his squad was pinned down by Japanese fire, Krause advanced alone against enemy positions, using his Garand to eliminate multiple enemy strongpoints before being mortally wounded. His ability to deliver rapid, accurate fire while maneuvering would have been impossible with a bolt-action rifle and suicidal with a short-ranged submachine gun. The Philippines campaign of 1944 and 45 saw limited deployment of Type 100s among Japanese forces, primarily with naval troops defending Manila. In urban combat, where the submachine gun should theoretically have excelled, the weapons proved ineffective against American forces. Marines and soldiers armed with M1 Garands could engage Japanese positions through walls and fortifications that stopped pistol-caliber rounds. The weak 8mm Nambu cartridge failed to penetrate even basic urban cover like wooden doors or furniture that Americans used for protection. Comparative testing conducted by American ordnance experts provided scientific validation of combat experience. At Aberdeen, proving ground-captured Type 100s were subjected to rigorous testing alongside M1 Garands. The results proved devastating for the Japanese weapon. Accuracy testing at 100 yards showed the M1 Garand grouping shots within 4 in, while the Type 100 could barely keep rounds on a standard silhouette target. Penetration tests demonstrated that the 306 could penetrate over 30 in of pine boards, while the 8mm Nambu penetrated less than 8 in. Reliability testing proved even more damning. The M1 Garand continued functioning after exposure to mud, sand, and water that completely disabled the Type 100 Daunt endurance testing showed the Garand capable of firing thousands of rounds with minimal maintenance, while Type 100s experienced increasing malfunctions after just a few hundred rounds. Cold weather testing relevant for potential operations in northern Japan or Korea showed the Garand functioning normally at -20 degrees F, while the Type 100's open-bolt mechanism froze. Solid. The institutional response to these tests was unanimous. American ordnance officers concluded that the Type 100 represented no improvement over World War I-era submachine guns and was inferior to contemporary Allied designs, like the British Sten or Soviet PPSH-41. More importantly, they confirmed that, for Pacific combat conditions, the M1 Garand remained vastly superior to any submachine gun regardless of origin. Veterans' accounts from the Battle of Iwo Jima in February and March 1945 consistently emphasized the M1 Garand's role in survival and victory. The volcanic ash of Iwo Jima created unique challenges for weapons maintenance. Yet, the Garand continued functioning when more delicate weapons failed. Marines could clear their rifles quickly and return to action. The 27 Medals of Honor awarded for actions at Iwo Jima often cited effective rifle fire in their narratives, testament to the M1 Garand's importance in individual combat actions. Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone, who had earned the Medal of Honor on Guadalcanal, was killed in action on Iwo Jima while leading an assault on Japanese positions. Witnesses reported that Basilone, armed with an M1 Garand after his machine gun was destroyed, continued to deliver effective fire while maneuvering his unit forward. His death demonstrated that even the finest weapons could not guarantee survival, but also that the M1 Garand gave Marinas the best possible chance in combat. The final major Pacific battle at Okinawa, from April through June 1945, saw the M1 Garand at its peak effectiveness. The 10th Army, comprising both Marine and Army divisions, brought overwhelming firepower to bear on Japanese positions. Individual riflemen with M1 Garands could engage Japanese forces at ranges exceeding 400 wide in the open terrain of southern Okinawa. In the close combat of the shoreline, the stopping power of the 30-06 proved essential for defeating determined Japanese defenders. The Japanese 32nd Army defending Okinawa included units equipped with the full range of Japanese small arms, including Type 100s. Yet, these weapons made no discernible impact on the battle's outcome. American after-action reports barely mentioned encountering Japanese submachine guns, focusing instead on the threat posed by artillery, mortars, and machine guns. The Type 100 had become so relevant to Japanese defensive schemes that many units didn't bother issuing them even when available. Ammunition expenditure at Okinawa illustrated American industrial supremacy. Marine and Army units fired over 200 million rounds of 30-06 ammunition during the 82-26 July Day campaign, more than twice Japan's total wartime production of 8 military Nambu ammunition. Individual Marines carried and expended more ammunition in a single day than Japanese soldiers received for entire operations. This profligate expenditure, impossible for Japanese forces, reflected absolute confidence in unlimited resupply. Post-war analysis by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey confirmed the decisive impact of American industrial superiority in small arms production. The survey concluded that Japan never developed the industrial infrastructure necessary for modern warfare. While Japanese craftsmen could produce individual weapons of reasonable quality, they could never achieve the mass production necessary for global conflict. The Type 100 represented this failure, a weapon that required too much skilled labor to produce too few inadequate weapons. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 provided unexpected validation of the M1 Garand's superiority over submachine guns in varied combat conditions. When North Korean and Chinese forces employed Soviet-supplied PSH-41 and PPS-43 submachine guns in mass infantry attacks. American and United Nations forces armed with M1 Garands consistently prevailed in ranged firefights. The Garand's accuracy and power at extended ranges proved decisive in the mountainous Korean terrain, where engagement distances often exceeded submachine gun effective range. Marine veterans of the Pacific War who served in Korea noted the similarity between Japanese and Communist tactics, both emphasizing mass assault and close combat to negate American firepower advantages. The M1 Garand, now supplemented with improved ammunition and better maintenance procedures, continued to provide the range and stopping power necessary to defeat these tactics. Marines at the chosen reservoir in November and December 1950, fighting in temperatures that reached 35 gravidur fans still, functioned when other weapons failed. The Japanese self-defense forces established in 1954 notably chose not to retain the Type 100 in any capacity. Instead, they initially adopted American M1 Garands provided through military assistance programs, implicit acknowledgement of the weapon's superiority. Former Imperial Japanese Army officers serving as advisors to the new force specifically cited the M1 Garand's reliability and effectiveness as reasons for adoption. They had learned through bitter experience what worked in modern warfare. Examination of surviving Type 100 specimens in museums reveals the weapon's fundamental design compromises. The horizontal magazine intended to allow prone firing with a long magazine actually made the weapon awkward in every firing position. The complex bayonet mounting system reflecting Japanese emphasis on blade weapons added weight and manufacturing complexity for a capability rarely used. The adjustable rear sight graduated to unrealistic ranges demonstrated disconnection between theoretical design and practical application. Original Japanese military manuals for the Type 100, translated after the war, revealed confused tactical doctrine. The manuals suggested employment at range sup to 400 meters, clearly impossible given the weapon's ballistics. They emphasized accuracy over volume of fire, contradicting the submachine gun's fundamental purpose. They recommended single shots rather than automatic fire to conserve ammunition, negating the weapon's primary advantage. These contradictions reflected Japanese military leadership's failure to understand modern automatic weapons employment. Cost analysis provided another dimension to the comparison. An M1 Garand cost the United States government approximately $85 in 1943. A Type 100 cost the Japanese government approximately $120 yen, roughly equivalent to $110 at wartime exchange rates. The Japanese paid more for an inferior weapon that required more skilled labor, more scarce materials, and more complex manufacturing processes. This economic inefficiency multiplied across all military production contributed to Japan's inevitable defeat. The human cost differential proved even more significant. Marines armed with M1 Garands consistently achieved favorable casualty ratios against Japanese forces. While exact figures varied by battle, American forces typically inflicted 10 or more Japanese casualties for every American loss. While superior tactics, training, artillery, and air support contributed to this disparity, the superiority of individual weapons like the M1 Garand played a crucial role. Every Marine with a Garand possessed more firepower than multiple Japanese soldiers with bolt-action rifles or inferior submachine guns. Maintenance requirements illustrated another crucial advantage. The M1 Garand required basic cleaning and lubrication that any Marine could perform with issued cleaning kit. Field stripping for basic maintenance took less than a minute. Complete disassembly for depot-level maintenance rarely proved necessary. The Type 100 required complex disassembly for basic cleaning, with numerous small parts that could be lost or damaged. The open bolt mechanism accumulated debris rapidly in field conditions, requiring frequent, complicated maintenance that Japanese forces rarely had time or materials to perform. The spare parts situation reinforced American advantages. Every Marine battalion included armorers with complete part sets for M1 Garands. Any damaged rifle could be repaired quickly or replaced entirely from stockpiles. Japanese forces rarely had spare parts for Type 100s. A damaged weapon became a useless burden. The complex manufacturing meant that parts from different production batches might not interchange properly. This logistical nightmare meant that even minor damage could permanently disable a Type 100. Weather resistance provided crucial advantages in the varied Pacific climates. The M1 Garand functioned reliably in the freezing mountains of northern Luzon, the steaming jungles of New Guinea, the coral dust of Tarawa, and the volcanic ash of Iwima. Its enclosed mechanism protected critical components from environmental contamination. The Type 100's open bolt mechanism exposed the entire action to contamination. Humidity caused rapid corrosion. Sand and dust created immediate malfunctions. Salt spray from amphibious operations corroded exposed steel components within hours. Night combat revealed unexpected advantages for the M1 Garand. The powerful 30-06 cartridge's muzzle flash, while revealing shooter position, also temporarily blinded enemy forces at close range. The distinctive sound of grand fire allowed Marines to identify friendly forces in darkness. The metallic ping of an ejecting en-bloc clip, often criticized as alerting enemies to an empty rifle, actually occurred amid such battlefield noise that enemies rarely noticed. Japanese veterans interviewed after the war could not recall ever exploiting this supposed vulnerability. The Type 100's muzzle flash and sound signature proved less distinctive and less intimidating. The weak report of the 8mm Nambu round failed to suppress enemy forces through psychological effect. The lower muzzle flash made target identification difficult in night combat. The cyclic rate of fire, whether fast or slow depending on model, consumed limited ammunition supplies rapidly without providing proportional combat effectiveness. Specialized ammunition availability provided additional American advantages. Marines could obtain armor-piercing 30-06 rounds for use against Japanese light armor and fortifications. Tracer rounds allowed fire direction and ranging. Incendiary rounds could ignite Japanese positions. The 8mm Nambu cartridge existed only in standard ball configuration. No specialized ammunition reached frontline Japanese units. This limitation restricted tactical options and reduced the Type 100's already marginal utility. The impact on small unit tactics proved transformative. American rifle squads built around M1 Garand equipped riflemen could operate independently with organic firepower. Japanese squads equipped primarily with bolt-action rifles and perhaps one Type 100 lacked comparable capability. This tactical disparity forced Japanese reliance on larger unit operations, making them vulnerable to American artillery and air power. The individual superiority of the M1 Garand thus contributed to operational and strategic advantages. Psychological warfare reports noted the demoralizing effect of American firepower on Japanese forces. Captured Japanese soldiers consistently mentioned the overwhelming volume and accuracy of American rifle fire. The ability of individual Marines to deliver rapid aimed fire created impression of much larger forces. Japanese officers reported difficulty maintaining morale when soldiers understood their weapons' inferiority. The Type 100, rather than boosting morale as a modern weapon, actually decreased confidence when soldiers recognized its inadequacy. Medical supply requirements reflected weapon effectiveness. Marine battalions required relatively modest medical supplies because the M1 Garand's effectiveness meant fewer wounded Marines. Japanese forces required extensive medical supplies because inferior weapons meant more Japanese wounded before achieving tactical objectives. The 8mm Nambu's poor stopping power meant enemy soldiers often required multiple hits. increasing ammunition expenditure and extending firefights that produced more casualties on both sides. Communication intercepts decoded by American intelligence revealed Japanese frustration with their small arms. Radio massages repeatedly requested ammunition resupply that never arrived. Officers complained about weapon malfunctions and inadequate firepower. Requests for more automatic weapons went unfulfilled due to production limitations. These intercepts confirmed what Marinists observed directly, that Japanese forces understood their technological disadvantage but could do nothing to remedy it. The surrender of Japan in August 1945 ended the Pacific War before the planned invasion of the Japanese home islands. Operation Downfall. The proposed invasion would have seen millions of M1 Garand-equipped American soldiers and Marines facing Japanese forces armed with whatever weapons remained. Intelligence estimates suggested that Japan retained fewer than 5,000 functional Type 100s for home defense. The invasion would have demonstrated on an unprecedented scale the superiority of American small arms and industrial capacity. Veterans returning from the Pacific brought unanimous verdict on the M1 Garand versus Type 100 comparison. In hundreds of oral histories, memoirs, and interviews, not a single Marine expressed preference for the Japanese submachine gun. Many recalled examining captured Type 100s out of curiosity. Some remembered test firing them using captured ammunition. None considered using one in combat. The consensus was absolute that the M1 Garand was the finest infantry rifle of the war. The legacy extends to modern military thinking about infantry weapons. The M1 Garand proved that individual soldier firepower delivered accurately at extended range provides decisive tactical advantages. The Type 100 demonstrated that theoretical capabilities mean nothing without practical effectiveness. Modern assault rifles attempt to combine the M1 Garand's power and accuracy with the submachine gun's automatic fire capability. But the fundamental lesson remains that reliability and effectiveness matter more than features. Military museums worldwide display M1 Garands as exemplars of successful military rifle design. The weapons remain functional after 80 years, testament to robust construction and sound engineering. Type 100s appear rarely in museums, usually as curiosities illustrating unusual or failed designs. When displayed together, the contrast remains stark. The Garand solid and purposeful. The Type 100 awkward and complicated. Collectors' markets reflect historical judgment. M1 Garands command premium prices as historically significant weapons that function reliably. Type 100s, when available at all, appeal primarily to collectors of unusual weapons. The few transferable Type 100s in the United States are valued more for rarity than historical importance or shooting capability. Ammunition scarcity makes actually firing them impractical. While .30-06 remains widely available for Garand shooters, modern military historians studying the Pacific War consistently conclude that American material superiority, including individual weapons like the M11 Garand, proved as decisive as superior tactics or strategy. The ability to equip every Marine with an effective, reliable, powerful rifle created cumulative advantages that no amount of Japanese courage or determination could overcome. The Type 100 represented Japanese military industry's inability to compete in modern industrial warfare. The final verdict comes from those who were there. Marine Corporal James Mitchell, who made that choice between M1 Garand and Type 100 on Guadalcanal in October 1942, survived the war and lived to age 91, asked decades later about his decision. Mitchell simply said he never considered taking the Japanese gun because his Garand had never let him down, and he knew it never would. That trust, multiplied across hundreds of thousands of Marines and soldiers, helped win the Pacific War. The mathematics were simple. One Marine with one M1 Garand possessed more practical firepower than multiple Japanese soldiers with any combination of weapons. That individual superiority multiplied across entire divisions created overwhelming tactical advantages. Those tactical advantages, accumulated across dozens of island battles, produced strategic victory. The M1 Garand was not just the greatest battle implement ever devised. As Patton stated, it was a war-winning weapon that validated American industrial democracy's ability to outproduce and outfight totalitarian adversaries. When the last Marines departed Japan after occupation duty in the late 1940s, they brought their Garands home. Many purchased their service rifles through the Director of Civilian Marksmanship program, keeping the weapons that had kept them alive. These rifles became family heirlooms passed to children and grandchildren with stories of Pacific battles. The remaining Type 100s stayed in Japan. Most were destroyed during the occupation, others left to corrode in forgotten depots, silent relics of defeat and technological shortfall. The comparison between the M1 Garand and the Type 100 goes far beyond technical details or combat performance. It embodies the contrast between democratic industrial strength and authoritarian limitation, between practical engineering and rigid tradition, between weapons created for soldiers and those forced upon them. Marines trusted the M1 Garand because it performed. They rejected the Type 100 because it failed them. In war, that single difference decides victory or ruin, life or death, return home or eternal rest on some distant Pacific shore. The numbers themselves tell the tale of industrial dominance versus collapse. Between 1936 and 1945, American factories built roughly 5.44 million M1 Garands, 3.5 million from Springfield Armory, found 30,080 from Winchester, with additional quantities from International Harvester and Harrington and Richardson during the Korean era. This massive achievement occurred even as the United States simultaneously turned out Sherman tanks, B-29 bombers, Liberty ships, and every other instrument of modern warfare. Japan, in contrast, produced perhaps 30,000 Type 100s, more likely closer to 10,000 by their own records. That was less than 1% of American rifle output for a weapon meant to deliver superiority in close combat. The disparity underscored the futility of Japan's attempts to match America's production. Every statistic favored the U.S. so completely that no tactical ingenuity could offset the overwhelming material imbalance. The results appeared in the Pacific War's casualty figures. Marine formations armed primarily with M1 Garands achieved kill ratios exceeding 10-to-1 against Japanese forces. While superior artillery and air power contributed, the edge began with the individual rifleman and his Garand. The Type 100, in the rare battles where it appeared, had no measurable impact. It lingered only as a footnote in after-action reports that praised American firepower's decisive edge. That decision, made by countless Marines like Corporal Mitchell on October 23, 1942, validated years of design work, millions of dollars in investment, and a transformation in doctrine. Each time a Marine fired his Garand and saw the result, he confirmed that U.S. planners had chosen wisely. Each Type 100 left behind on a Pacific battlefield testified that Japan's leadership had failed its soldiers by giving them inferior arms for a modern war. The story ends where it began, with individual Marines making personal life-or-death choices. They chose the weapon that offered survival and success. They chose overwhelming firepower over empty refinement. They chose industrial might over outdated martial pride. They chose the M1 Garand, and that decision helped them win the Pacific War. At Tarawa, the 2nd Marine Division faced Japanese defenders armed with a mix of weapons, including limited numbers of Type 100s issued to naval landing forces. During the brutal 76-hour fight, those weapons proved hopelessly inadequate against Marines with Garands. Fixed Japanese positions negated any theoretical advantage in close quarters, while Marines could engage targets beyond the Type 100's reach. Veterans' testimonies consistently reinforced this truth. Staff Sergeant James E. Burns of the 5th Marine Division, who fought on Iwo Jima, recalled that captured Japanese guns were treated as curiosities, not as practical alternatives. Marines might inspect them out of interest, but none considered using them. The faint pop of the 8mm Nambu cartridge was barely audible beneath the thunder of the American .30-06, earning the derisive nickname Woodpecker Gun. Technical assessments by U.S. ordnance experts confirmed what Marines already knew. Reports from the Aberdeen Proving Ground highlighted numerous flaws. The horizontal magazine made prone fire awkward and exposed the shooter. The weapon required excessive precision in manufacturing, and full auto-fire was nearly uncontrollable. Japanese officers themselves admitted shortages of ammunition, sometimes only 60 rounds per gun for entire operations, and minimal training, with most troops firing only a handful of magazines before combat. Post-war Japanese evaluations conceded that the Type 100 provided no significant tactical advantage. Industrial data painted an even bleaker picture. Producing one Type 100 took roughly 45 man-hours in 1940, rising to over 60 by 1944. In comparison, an M1 Garand required about 9 man-hours, dropping to under 6 as production efficiency improved. American factories could thus build 7 Garands for every single Type 100, and the Garand was far superior in battle. Supply chains told the same story. The M1 Garand used materials readily available from U.S. industry, while the Type 100 relied on imported alloys, scarce chrome, and precision machinery increasingly lost to bombing raids. Each B-29 strike degraded Japanese production quality further. Ammunition statistics reveal perhaps the starkest divide. American industry produced roughly 47 billion rounds of small arms ammunition during the war, including over 10 billion .30-06 cartridges. Japan managed under 100 million rounds of 8mm Nambu ammunition for all weapons combined. Marines fired freely, confident of endless resupply. Japanese troops rationed every bullet, never certain of more. Training mirrored these realities. U.S. Marines trained extensively in marksmanship, qualifying at ranges up to 500 yards. Every Marine a rifleman was more than a motto. It was doctrine. Even cooks and clerks could use their Garands effectively in combat. Japanese soldiers rarely trained seriously with their Type 100s, often firing fewer than 100 rounds before facing battle. This difference created a psychological gap as well. Marines had total confidence in their rifles, knowing they would function in any condition and deliver crushing firepower. That faith translated into aggression, accuracy, and superior small unit performance. Japanese troops, by contrast, knew their weapons' limitations. Captured diaries reveal frustration and despair that American rifles could kill at ranges they could not match. That awareness fueled desperate banzai charges, attempts to close the distance and make their inferior arms matter. Medical evidence further confirmed the disparity. Marine doctors noted that .30-06 wounds were catastrophic, instantly incapacitating and often fatal, while Japanese medics found 8mm Nambu injuries frequently survivable if treated quickly. Logistics followed suit. Marine units carried a 300-round basic load per Garand, with limitless resupply. Japanese units carried only 120 rounds per Type 100, often with no replenishment. In the end, this story underscores a timeless military truth. Advanced does not mean effective. Modern does not guarantee superior. Complexity rarely equals capability. In real combat, simple, reliable, and powerful always triumphs over intricate, fragile, and weak. The Marines learned that lesson firsthand. They chose the weapon that kept them alive, and they chose the M1 Garand. When the last Marines left Okinawa in June 1945 after the Pacific's bloodiest campaign, they carried their Garands home. Japanese Type 100s littered the battlefields, abandoned by their users, rejected by their captors, obsolete even before they saw full service. The verdict was final. In the crucible of combat, Marines chose reliability over novelty, power over rate of fire, and substance over style. That choice vindicated American design, industrial foresight, and the wisdom of soldiers who knew one enduring fact. In war, the best weapon is the one that works every single time. The M1 Garand was that weapon, and every Marine who carried it into battle knew it.